For 300 years, the Calthar Dominion devoured human space. Colonies vanished, medical frigates burned, and Earth's protests were met with laughter. On the day of final annexation, High Emperor Voreth broadcast an ultimatum: surrender in 1 hour. At the deadline, a single human signal officer, a forgotten bureaucrat, typed 6 letters into a dusty console. Enough. Across 10,000 warships, faster-than-light drives harmonized into a cold reset cycle. The Dominion's armada fell silent, adrift and powerless, as a hidden human fleet unfolded from the dark. Humanity had not been beaten. It had been waiting. While the Dominion feasted, human shipyards secretly fabricated every faster-than-light drive sold to the enemy. Bureaucrats and intelligence officers played weak for 3 centuries, wiring a single command into the firmware of 10,000 warships. No one saw it coming because no one believed the gentle species could plan a revenge this quiet. The question that still haunts surviving Dominion admirals is simple. How does a civilization fool an entire galaxy for 300 years? The answer begins not with a weapon, but with a strategy so patient it looks like surrender. In the earliest years of Calthar aggression, Earth's joint chiefs gathered in a bunker under the Gobi Desert and faced an impossible truth. The Dominion outnumbered humanity's navy 50-1. Every simulation ended the same way: direct war meant extinction. So they built a different plan. They called it the Long Silence. The plan rested on a single insight. The Dominion did not build its own technology. It conquered, it looted, and it bought from whoever sold cheapest. So Earth would become the seller. Through 17 layers of shell corporations, fake subsidiaries, and alien frontmen, human shipyards and systems the Dominion had never heard of began producing faster-than-light drives of exceptional reliability. They undercut every competitor. Within 50 years, 90% of the Calthar war fleet was jumping through human-made cores. What the Dominion never knew was that deep in the firmware of every drive, beneath millions of lines of navigation code, sat a dormant instruction. It had no trigger except a single word, transmitted on a frequency so archaic it was dismissed as static. That word was not a command. It was a permission. The architect of this quiet weapon was a woman named Alara Vance, an engineer whose entire division was erased from public records in 2163. She spent 40 years designing a cascade failure that looked exactly like routine hardware wear. She died before she could see it used, but she trained her replacement. That replacement trained another. The secret passed through 3 generations of signals intelligence officers, all waiting for a day they hoped would never come. For 3 centuries, humanity absorbed humiliation. Frontier colonies were raided. Diplomatic envoys were executed. Earth's protests were broadcast and ignored. The Dominion grew comfortable. High Emperor Voreth, a ruler who had never lost a campaign, began calling humans the whimper species. He genuinely believed they lacked the spine for real power. On the morning of the final annexation, Voreth stood before the Grand Concordance, the assembled representatives of 200 subjugated species, and delivered his ultimatum. Earth would dissolve its government. Its territories would become Calthar provinces. Its population would be classified as a servitor species. He gave humanity 1 hour to broadcast unconditional surrender. He then leaned back in his throne, smirked, and ordered refreshments. In a calm relay station on a moon of Neptune, a middle-aged signal officer named Marcus Cole listened to the broadcast alone. No one knew his real title. No one knew that tucked inside his standard-issue console was a keyhole with a single physical button. He had sat in that chair for 22 years, a man who had been carefully trained to be invisible. He cracked his knuckles, poured himself a cup of cold coffee, and typed 6 letters onto a dusty terminal. He pressed enter. The protocol did not activate a weapon. It unlocked a sequence that turned every FTL core in Dominion space into inert scrap. But that was only the first half. The second half was the fleet, the hidden fleet. And that is where the galaxy's worst nightmare turned human. The hidden fleet did not arrive with fanfare. It simply unfolded like a breathing thing from the cold void between stars where no sensor had ever looked. Terran dreadnoughts, silent and black, emerged in exact formation around every major Calthar military installation simultaneously. Their hulls were studded with kinetic impactors, massive tungsten rods that required no explosives, just gravity and patience. No hails were sent. No threats were issued. They just waited. On the Dominion flagship, the Emperor's Bane, High Admiral Korath watched his entire bridge erupt in confusion. 300 ships under his direct command, each one dark. Life support flickering on emergency reserves. Communications reduced to short-range radio. The greatest war fleet in galactic history had become a museum of dead metal in the space of 12 seconds. Then the image of a human woman appeared on every remaining screen in the fleet. She was not a general. She wore no uniform. She looked like an engineer who had not slept in days. Her name was Miriam Vance, granddaughter of the woman who designed the long silence. She spoke 8 sentences that changed the galaxy forever. Your fleet is disabled. You have no weapons, no jump capability, and no reinforcements. A second human fleet is positioned above your homeworld. We do not seek your destruction. We seek your disarmament. The old order is null. Every species under Calthar domination is now free. You will cede your military infrastructure to a multi-species oversight council, or we will wait. We have 300 years of patience left. The psychological effect was total collapse. For centuries, the Dominion had built its identity on absolute superiority. Their propaganda painted humans as soft, disorganized, incapable of long-term strategy. The revelation that every FTL drive they had purchased for generations was a sleeper cell, that human bureaucrats had patiently embedded a kill switch into the technological backbone of their empire, broke something fundamental in the Dominion psyche. Admirals who had never tasted defeat stared at blank consoles and wept. Korath, a veteran of 60 campaigns, did something no one expected. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed through his dead bridge. He had always suspected the humans were more dangerous than they appeared. He had warned the High Emperor decades ago that buying drives from unknown manufacturers was a strategic vulnerability. He was overruled, mocked, sidelined. Now, facing the vindication of his worst fear, he gave the order that no Dominion admiral had ever given. He surrendered. Across the galaxy, the scene repeated, not everywhere peacefully. On the frontier fortress of Galactic, a Dominion commander named Vex refused to accept the situation. He ordered his crew to abandon the dead ships and fight on the surface with ground forces. The hidden fleet responded with a single kinetic impactor dropped from orbit. It struck an empty desert 60 kilometers from the base. The seismic shockwave shattered every window in the fortress, and the crater was visible from space. No one died, but Vex surrendered within the hour. The message was clear. Humanity had the power to annihilate, and it was choosing not to. That choice was more terrifying than destruction. But the most significant pivot happened not on a battlefield, but in the halls of a neutral trade station called Nexus Prime. The Dominion had long maintained a stranglehold on interstellar commerce, taxing every jump lane and enforcing brutal quotas. When the reset hit, the station's jump gates went dark, and the Dominion overseers found themselves locked in their own offices by human agents who had been embedded as janitors, cooks, and cargo inspectors for decades. The station's multi-species population, long resentful, did not riot. They simply watched as the handcuffs were applied. Then they cheered. And in that moment, Miriam Vance's promise began to take shape. It was not enough to defeat the Dominion. Humanity had to replace it. Offer something the galaxy had never seen, a compact where every species, regardless of military strength, held an equal seat. The hidden fleet was not an occupation force. It was a guarantee. The old order was null. Now the galaxy had to decide if it believed in the new one. But belief is fragile, and deep in the Calthar core worlds, a different idea was already forming. Revenge. The idea did not fester in quiet shadows. It was shouted from the balconies of a dozen Calthar core worlds by a warlord named Tarkin. He was a cousin of High Emperor Vorath, a scarred veteran who had been off-world during the reset, commanding a small flotilla of patrol cutters still running on sublight engines. Tarkin gathered the remnants of the Dominion's ground divisions. the intelligence officers who had escaped capture, and the fanatical noble houses who refused to accept a galaxy without Calthar supremacy. His rallying cry was simple: humanity had cheated. A species that hid its strength was not honorable. The reset was not a victory, it was a crime, and crimes demand retribution. Within weeks, Tarkin's forces seized a human orbital manufacturing platform in the neutral Fendra system. It was a lightly defended facility that assembled deep space communication relays. His troops boarded it with brutal efficiency, capturing the skeleton crew and declaring they would dismantle the site to extract the secrets of the kill switch. Tarkin broadcast his triumph across every frequency, promising the galaxy that the human deception would be reversed and the Dominion restored. But here is what Tarkin did not know. That platform was not a factory. It was a honeypot. From the earliest days of the Long Silence, human intelligence had seeded the frontier with hundreds of seemingly ordinary installations, each one designed to look like a vulnerable asset, each one a trap for exactly this moment. The moment Tarkin's engineers powered up the platform's mainframe, they triggered a dormant subroutine that had been waiting longer than any of them had been alive. The subroutine did not attack. It simply sent a single ping along a frequency no Dominion scanner could detect. And on the other side of the galaxy, Miriam Vance received it. Her response was immediate. She did not send warships. She did not issue a warning. She transmitted a command string that cascaded through the Calthar core worlds via the very civilian infrastructure the Dominion had purchased from human suppliers over a century. Every automated defense turret on the homeworld of Calthar Prime suddenly rebooted into diagnostic mode. Every atmospheric scrubber in the capital city cycled down to minimum output. Every medical scanner in the planetary hospital network displayed a single message: disarmament is not optional. No one died. But for 6 hours, the most advanced civilization in known space was reminded that its own walls breathed on human permission. Tarkin watched from the captured platform as his own homeworld went dark in 1,000 small, terrifying ways. Then his engineers made a second discovery, one that shattered the last vestiges of resistance. While combing through the platform's memory banks, they found a file labeled simply Cascade. It contained a full schematic of every Calthar naval asset built after the year 2200. It listed not just the FTL drives, but the life support, the weapons guidance, the artificial gravity, the sewage recyclers. Every single system had a firmware backdoor. The Dominion had not just bought drives from humanity. They had bought everything. And humanity had patiently woven a kill thread into the weave of their entire empire. The psychological collapse was total. Tarkin's own officers began to desert. A Calthar weapons engineer named Sira, who had spent her life maintaining the Empire's most advanced starship cannons, stood before her comrades and read aloud from the file. Her voice shook as she recited the list of compromised systems. When she finished, she said, "We were never winning. We were being tolerated." She laid down her sidearm and walked out of the room. The revenge movement fell apart before it could fire a single shot. But the worst revelation was still waiting. Miriam Vance, in a moment of cold transparency, released a partial inventory of every backdoor, every override, every contingency human engineers had embedded across 240 species, technological infrastructures over the past 3 centuries. The list was so vast that it could not be displayed on a single screen. The galaxy learned that humanity had never been weak. It had simply chosen, with terrifying discipline, not to act. And the choice to finally say, enough, was itself an act of restraint, because the full capability of the hidden fleet and its deep code arsenal had never been fully activated. That capability was the bridge to the final question. If humanity could do this, what else were they still holding back? The answer would reshape the new order before it even began. The answer arrived not in a war declaration, but in a single file buried inside the oldest data vault on Earth. It was a final protocol, never activated, never acknowledged by any human government. Its name was Cedar. Cedar did not target warships. It targeted the underlying architecture of civilization itself. Any device that contained a microchip manufactured in human-aligned factories, which by that century meant nearly every piece of technology in the known galaxy, could be added to the cascade. Life support grids, agricultural synthesizers, water recyclers. Cedar could, in theory, hold a population hostage without firing a single shot. The architect of the Long Silence, Alara Vance, had designed it as a deterrent, and she had hidden its existence so completely that only 3 people alive knew it was real. Miriam Vance was one of them. She never activated Cedar. Instead, she revealed its existence to the first assembly of the Galactic Compact, the multi-species council she had promised, and offered a choice. Humanity would dismantle every embedded backdoor, including Cedar, on one condition. Every species, including Earth itself, must submit to permanent invasive disarmament inspections. No secret fleets, no hidden shipyards, no quiet plans for a counter-reset. The room fell into stunned silence as the delegates realized the true genius of the human strategy. They had not merely disarmed the Dominion. They had built the mechanism to disarm everyone, including themselves. The weakness humanity had performed for centuries was a mirror held up to the galaxy. Would anyone else willingly surrender their hidden knives? That question almost fractured the compact before it could take its first breath. The Veltari Consortium, a middling power that had quietly profited from Dominion expansion, walked out of the negotiations on the 3rd day. Their ambassador declared that no sovereign species would accept a human-imposed leash. Miriam did not argue. She transmitted a message to the Hidden Fleet with a single order: release the full technical schematics of every Veltari warship and surveillance satellite, all of which contained human-made components, directly to the Veltari public. The ambassador reversed his position within 6 hours after protesters surrounded his embassy demanding answers. The leash, it turned out, was already woven into their necks. They just had not felt it until now. One by one, the delegation signed. High Emperor Vorath, captured by his own palace guards after the reset, was delivered to the compact in restraints. His trial became the symbolic end of the old era. He stood in a chamber surrounded by the species he had subjugated, and he listened as former slaves read the names of every world his empire had burned. Then Miriam Vance did something unexpected. She asked the compact not to execute him. Let him live, she said. Let him watch peace become boring. That, more than any execution, broke him. He spent the rest of his life on a remote station, staring out a window at a galaxy he had once owned, now quiet and orderly without him. The Hidden Fleet did not stay hidden. It became the enforcement arm of the compact, its hulls repainted white, its kinetic impactors removed and repurposed as construction anchors for orbital habitats. The Terran dreadnoughts that had once embodied a terrible, patient threat became the galaxy's first disaster response fleet, ferrying supplies and rebuilding infrastructure. Humanity, once dismissed as the whimper species, had become something stranger, a shepherd that had proven it could be a wolf, and then chose the crook over the teeth. But the final, quietest revelation would only emerge years later, and it would change the meaning of everything that came before. In the personal journals of Alara Vance, discovered by her granddaughter while cataloging the family archive, was a note written in the margin of the original Long Silence design document. It read, "Our greatest weapon is not the kill switch. It is our ability to build trust after the switch is known." She had never intended Cedar to be used. She had intended it to be leaked one day, when the galaxy was ready to understand that humanity had held absolute power and voluntarily placed it on the table. The entire century-spanning deception was a setup for a single act of radical transparency. The 6 letters Marcus Cole typed, the word enough, were not the end of a war. They were the beginning of a test. And for the first time in galactic history, every species passed. What they passed, and what humanity had truly given up to win it, is a story even the quietest historians are only now beginning to understand. That story, the one about what humanity gave up, is still being written in the quiet council chambers of the Compact and the rebuilt colonies of 100 liberated species. But here is what we know now. The mask of weakness that humanity wore for 3 centuries was not a lie. It was a shield, and when it was dropped, what stood revealed was not a monster but a mirror. The galaxy saw its own reflection in that hidden fleet, in the kill switches, in the raw capability that never needed to be fired. And the question that still echoes through every diplomatic channel, every trade negotiation, every uneasy peace is this: what else might be sleeping under the surface of the ordinary? Not just in humanity, but in every species that ever learned to smile while sharpening a blade. That is the legacy of a single word typed on a dusty console by a man whose name most people still do not know. Not domination, not revenge, but a permanent, uncomfortable quiet. A universe that now knows, without doubt, that patience is a weapon and restraint is a choice. And the most terrifying part, it chose to love the quiet more than the victory. If this story of impossible patience, hidden strength, and a galactic reset built on 6 letters kept you thinking long after the final word, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that quiet does not mean weak. And if you want more stories that peel back the surface of the ordinary to find the extraordinary underneath, subscribe and ring the bell. We will be here, waiting in the silence with the next one.